Hi, I'm Lisa Wood. I'm the instructor for Drawing One fall term at Brandon University. And today's the first class of Drawing One. We're going to talk about what is drawing, kind of have a little bit of a course overview, and think about what we might be doing in the class. So, to begin with, I wanted to really think about what a drawing is. So, a drawing or drawing can be a verb, right? Like I am drawing, I'm in the act of drawing, I'm in the process, or it can be a noun. So, it can be a descriptor of the thing that's produced afterwards, right? The drawing. And you might have some ideas. You probably have a lot of ideas about what drawing is and what you expect in this course. And I just want to take a minute to open things up a little bit and really think about what drawing could be and what our imagination says drawing is. Oh, I just found out something new about my streaming service here. I'm still learning, so you got to bear with me, you guys. Okay, I think I'm back on. So, what constitutes a drawing? What are the things that you think about when you want to make a drawing? What do you think a drawing is going to be? What are you going to learn in drawing that you're not going to learn in painting, and vice versa? So, you might start thinking, okay, well, a drawing would be like using a pencil to make marks on a paper, right? That would be a drawing. Or what if I didn't want to do that on a paper? Like, could I draw on a wall? Would that still be a drawing? Sure, it'd be a wall drawing, right? So maybe it's about dragging media across a surface more generally than having to say that it relates to a paper. I like that definition more because it's more open. What if we want to use a drawing media that's not dry? Like, what if we want to use, what if we want to use ink? So ink's a wet media. We might even use a brush, a paint brush, in order to use the ink. So would that still be a drawing or would that be a painting? Can you paint in ink and draw in ink, and what might the differences be? So these are things that we're going to think about throughout the course. I don't have all the answers for you just right now, but it's more something that's felt and experienced as you try these different media out, and that's something that we'll be doing a lot in Drawing One is trying out and getting good at different media, like pencil, like charcoal, Conte crayon possibly, and also India ink, which is really fun. Okay. So, if we're thinking about drawing as a verb, so to draw, right, to be in the act of drawing, a lot of artists have thought about drawing as a verb and about the importance of the process of drawing over the end product. So, I wanted to show you guys a few examples of some process drawing and what that looks like. So this next slide, we've got Michelle Stewart, Sayreville Strata Quartet from 1976. And this image is, this series of images are to be seen together. And what the artist did was she went out into the desert and she dug at different depths. And at each depth, she would take soil samples or sand samples, and which has natural pigments in it, and then she would rub the natural pigment into the paper. So she's dragging the media across the paper, just like we just said was drawing. But she's creating these thick bands of coloration. And you can see that as the strata gets lower, the pigmentation gets darker. So it's a visual representation of the earth, but in a very different way than we might consider like an illusionistic representation. Okay, I really like this next piece. All right, so this is Nam June Paik, and it's Zen for Head. This piece was done in 1962 at a Fluxus performance, and basically what Nam June Paik did was interpret another artist, Lamont Young, to interpret his instructions called Composition 1960 Number 10 to Bob Morris. And those instructions read, draw a straight line and follow it. Okay, so if we just take a second to think about what Lamont Young was saying, if I look at the text that's on the screen here, Lamont explained of his work, I felt that a line was one of the more sparse, singular expressions of oneness, although it certainly is not the final expression. Somebody might choose a point. The line was interesting because it was continuous. It existed in time. A line is a potential of existing in time. It graphs and scores one designates time as one dimension. Nonetheless, the actual drawing of the line did involve time, and it did involve a singular event. Okay, so drawing a line would mean drawing. And Nam June Paik thought, okay, if I'm going to draw a line and follow it, what would be kind of an outrageous way I could do that? So he got this piece of paper, it's 4 meters long, and in the bowl that you can see next to the paper, he's mixed India ink with tomato juice. Now, why that specifically, I actually don't know. And then he's using his head as the drawing implement, and he's dipped his head into the paint mixture and then drawn the line onto the paper. So this is drawing. It's probably not what you think about when you think about drawing, but this is actually drawing. Okay, so if we want to look at an updated version of that, or another version of that type of a performance, this is Janine and Tony in her piece Love and Care from 1992. So we go forward in time like 30 years. And she is using a brand of hair dye called Love and Care in order to paint the floor in the gallery. So you can kind of see a bucket behind her body there. She's dipped her really long hair into the hair dye, and then she's rubbing her head onto the floor in order to make this kind of mopping gesture. So she's thinking a lot about feminist ideals. So she's dyeing her hair while she's also mopping the floor. I mean, the mopping's making a big mess, but she's also creating a drawing. So she is dragging media across a surface. Mimi Gelman also thought about this idea of performative drawing, and in this piece called Night Drawing 1 from 2009, she's making drawing by walking through the snow. And, you know, as Canadians or as people living in Canada, perhaps, we likely have had the experience of making tracks in the snow and their ability to track time and space and to act as a drawing element. So this is a photograph capturing that performance. The photograph is what lived on in exhibition, and it was in an exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art. So if you want to look more at this piece, you can always come back. I'll post just the images to Moodle in a slideshow format, and you can go in and click the hyperlinks to the different websites. Okay, so moving forward in time some more, this is Earthline Tattoo Collective. This is a performance that happened at the Winnipeg Art Gallery. And in this performance, curator Julie Nagum, who is the woman on the right, is getting tattooed at the show called Insurgence Resurgence, which happened at the WAG in 2018. So this is an Indigenous tattoo collective. They're doing traditional tattooing. And what I love about this piece is that the tattooing is the act of drawing. So the gentleman on the left is tattooing Julie. He's in the process of drawing. But then there's a transformative thing where now Julie will always, it's totally permanent, right? So now Julie is always going to have that tattoo on her, and she holds drawing as a noun. She holds the product of the drawing, but what the product of the drawing is going to do is prompt her to remember this really important ceremony of tattooing. Okay, so that's drawing as a noun or as a verb. Now let's talk about drawing as a noun. So here's drawing as a noun from a catalog essay. The exhibition was called Drawing Now, 8 Propositions. It was an exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art from 2003. And what was kind of interesting is around early 2000s, there was this big shift. So 70s, 80s, 90s, there's a lot of drawing as a verb. So a lot of artists interested in the process of drawing over the product of drawing. And then there's this big shift that happened, and people became much more interested in the product of drawing over the process of drawing. So if I read to you from this screen, it says, although the works in Drawing Now, 8 Propositions, vary tremendously in technique, medium, size, scale, and imagery, they share a similar rejection of the orientation towards process, exhibiting more affinities with 19th century drawing than with the graphic effusions of American artists in the 70s, like Nam June Paik, right? By and large, these drawings are finished and autonomous and to some degree representational. They're projective. I think this is what's important. They're projective. That is, they depict something that has been imagined before it's drawn, as opposed to being found through the drawing process. Okay, that's interesting. So let's take a look at one of the artists that were included in this exhibition as a counterpoint to the other works that we were just looking at. Okay, so Toba Kendori, an Untitled Seats from 1996. This is the installation view. I wanted you to see the scale of these pieces. They're totally massive. And then the drawing on the back wall there, this is a detail of it coming up next. Okay, so obviously this artist has had an idea about drawing a theater, right? And drawing the chairs from a theater. And that idea then gets made into a drawing. We're actually not that interested in like seeing this person sit in front of the drawing and meticulously draw every single one of those chairs. We're just interested in the product of the drawing afterwards and what that means, what it means about inclusion, what it means about being together, what it means about witnessing spectacle. Now that we're in COVID-19, we might think about all those chairs and how nobody can sit in them because we're not allowed to be in the same space together in that same way, unless there's a big X between every other chair or something. So the image, the representation becomes the content over the doing, the process. Okay, so if we think about, moving into this mode of drawing as a noun, we have drawings that describe things. That's pretty basic. This last drawing that we saw, that described something. It described a theater or theater seating. So another example might be this drawing by Lucian Freud called Eli from 2002. It's actually an etching, and which means that Lucian Freud etched into a copper plate and then inked the copper plate to make the image. So it's a dog. We know it's a dog. It really looks like a dog. I have a feeling that dog looked just like that as it was laying there sleeping. It describes what Lucian Freud saw. So in this way, it almost encompasses the role of what like a camera would do. Okay, it's not totally like a photograph, but it is in a way. Okay, John Singer Sargent, flamenco dancer from 1879. This is another image where John Singer Sargent is describing a flamenco dancer. I'm imagining that he's actually watching a flamenco dancer in real time. And what is he able to capture? How can he describe that flamenco dancer? That's what he's doing here. He's describing that flamenco dancer. So he isn't doing it by making it look really precise, but he's using drawing to show us an idea about what happened. Okay, it's kind of messy. I would call this gesture drawing. All right, drawings that visualize. Okay, drawings that visualize are a little bit different because they're not just showing me something that exists. It's not taking place of a photograph. Drawings that visualize want to show me something that's perhaps not real or not easily seen. So with my next example, I need to show you this sculpture first. So this is Borghese's Gladiator from 100 BCE. It's a very famous sculpture. You might talk about it in art history. And the Borghese Gladiator allowed this next artist to think about human anatomy. So let's see him. Okay, so this is Salvage, and he made a whole anatomical book where he looked at the gladiator from the previous slide, and he showed people how the skeletal system, how the muscular system would work underneath that pose. So he's showing us something that is there but is not easily seen. So this is why we're visualizing it. The artist is depicting something that can't just be seen with your own eyes easily. So that's one example of that. And then another example would be, if you're planning for something, this artist, Jean Tinguely, was planning to make a sculpture, a moving sculpture called Homage to New York in 1960. And in order to plan out how this sculpture was going to work, how this kinetic sculpture was going to work, he made a sketch. And the sketch helped him tell other people who were helping him what he was going to do, right? We use sketching like this all of the time. So this is helping us visualize, drawings that visualize. So here's an image. Here's an image of the actual sculpture. It's bananas. So if you want to go back into the Moodle and pull this up, check out that Vimeo link and you can actually see this thing in its crazy movement. It's pretty amazing. But you can see how the sketch helped him visualize what was going to happen and then make it happen. Okay, and finally, we have drawings that symbolize. So visualization, we're trying to show something that could exist or is in existence but is hard to see. Symbolic drawings are making use of our imagination and using drawings to tell us something that doesn't exist in real life. So this piece is actually after Peter Bruegel the Elder, which means that an artist in his studio made this, not Peter Bruegel himself. It's called The Temptation of St. Anthony in 1525. So, I don't think that this artist went out and looked at his lake view and saw a giant head with a giant fish and tiny creatures coming out of it, right? We understand that this is not a real thing. We understand that this is fantasy. It's not exactly a visualization in the way that I'm speaking about because it's not something that could happen or is happening on a separate system. This is saying, okay, there's a story, The Temptation of St. Anthony. I'm not really good with my biblical stories, but I do understand that the temptation of St. Anthony has to do with being tempted by demons and women generally. So here's a way to symbolize or to use allegory to talk about that story. So here's all the demons, here's all the things that are tempting St. Anthony and trying to draw him over into this bizarre other world. And you might know the artist Hieronymus Bosch, and Bosch made a painting of the Temptation of St. Anthony in 1501 that was obviously very influential to this engraving. Or rather, that's not an engraving, it's a lithostone, so it's another form of printmaking related to drawing. Okay, but we could also symbolize really differently and think about Julie Meritou. This is Black City from 2007. Way more updated, right? We're moving into the 21st century. And she's symbolizing the feeling of being in the city, the feeling of chaos, the feeling of architecture, the feeling of explosion, right? So she's using dynamic diagonal lines and a composition that focuses from the middle outward. And she's doing that in order to talk about her feelings towards the city and how the city operates. So very symbolic. Okay. We also have subjective versus objective drawing. This is something that's going to come up a lot in class and in your reading about drawing. So what does it mean and how does it work? So if we think about something that's really objective, right? If it's objective, the artist hasn't put in a lot of their own interpretation. So this drawing by Zoe Frank, Standing Male Back from 2011. I think that there was a guy standing in the room, a model, who was posing for her, and she drew him. I believe that he looked like this drawing describes. Okay, it's very objective. Her goal was to make a drawing that looked like the person in front of her. She totally achieved it. What a beautiful drawing, right? Beautiful anatomical drawing. Okay. So what about this one now? This is Alice Neal, Richard from 1971. So we've got Richard. I have a feeling that Richard looked like this, right? I think that Richard, this is probably a good kind of characterization of Richard, but the way that she's chosen to draw his shirt in particular. Let's look at his shirt. So that shirt looks kind of messy. The lines are really loose. I get the feeling that Richard is kind of a casual guy. I don't think that Richard is like uptight and making sure that his clothes are neatly pressed. So the way that the drawing is made is giving me information about how I'm supposed to think about the subject. So that would be subjective. So it gets more and more subjective. Kathy Kollowitz is another one who uses quite a lot of subjectivity. So this is The Survivors from 1923. And, she's making drawings that look like people. So they're objective in that way. I know that the face structure is very correct, particularly that middle face that has the very shadowed eyes, right? We're just seeing the eye sockets. But there have been a lot of subjective artistic choices that have gone into the way that the image is made, including bringing in all of those figures to have a sense of chaos and trauma and despair. Also, the use of so much black. I mean, it's really dark. Just visually, it's dark, and it's depicting a very dark, sad subject. So Kathy Kollowitz is a German artist who worked between the wars, First World War, Second World War in Germany. And her work was really about activism around what the war did to the people. Okay, and finally, I like this image a lot. I love Nicole Eisenman. She's so funny and smart, and she can draw like the Dickens, but chooses to use a lot of subjectivity. So I like the way, like this figure is kind of mimicking me right now, although I'm not sitting with a bottle of wine next to me. I've got my cup of coffee here. But the figure is bulbous head as it's leaning towards perhaps the camera, really dazed looking. Maybe this is how you feel at home with your hand against your face. The rest of the body starts to diminish. Look at that tiny little hand holding the mouse. So obviously very subjective, but the subjectivity of the way it's drawn is giving us a real feeling about drawing. So drawing can be really exciting because we can think about the process of drawing. We can really interrogate what is a drawing. We can make the work totally about the making of the drawing, but we can also think about all of the ways that drawing as a noun come in, and the possibilities are humongous. So that's what I love about drawing, is that it can encompass such a wide range of things. And it's my hope that this year we'll explore a wide range of things, that you'll get to try out different things that you didn't expect, as well as honing in those objective drawing skills, which I do think are very important and help us to be able to make decisions on subjectivity. So, we are going to really focus together on getting some skills so that you can see an object and you can represent it on the 2D picture plane like Zoe Frank has done here. You're going to really work towards getting some chops in drawing. And then you're going to learn how to transition those skills into some subjective choices that will really help you say something in your drawings and in your art practice. Okay, thanks guys. We'll talk soon.